All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to session 6 of Introduction to Judaism. Tonight, the topic is how we talk to God. And basically, we're going to be talking about an essential piece of Jewish practice, which is prayer. Although, as we'll see in a moment, prayer is not the best word for what we are going to be talking about. The word that we use for prayer in Judaism is lehitpalel. It's not really prayer. It comes from the word from the Hebrew root pei lamed lamed, which essentially means to judge and it's in a reflexive form. So prayer is to judge one's self. Like tefillah is to judge oneself, to struggle with oneself, to submit to one's own judgment. The word prayer in English comes from Latin, and it means to ask for something and request. And while request is certainly a part of Jewish of tefillah, what we call prayer, request is not the primary thing that we do. In fact, prayer or tefillah is in 3 different categories. It breaks down into 3 categories. One is praise, one is request, and one is thanks, giving thanks. And the prayer, the thing that we do most frequently, I would say, in our siddur is praise. We express praise, and we'll come back to the siddur in just a minute. I mentioned it in our first session, talking about a bit of history of the siddur and where that came from. And we'll get to that in a second when we talk about the structure of a Jewish service of a tefillah and how that looks. The rabbis spend lots of time talking about tefillah, and in fact, they say, what is tefillah? What's the essence of tefillah? Why do we do it? A question maybe I'll address this later. There's a weekday siddur. Yes, I will. I'll address the questions of specifics of siddurim a little bit later, certainly. But I'll get to that a bit. Like I said, a bit later. So, tefillah, the rabbis talk about, like, what is it, and really the idea of tefillah is drawn from the sacrificial system in the Torah. So the Torah doesn't speak really of prayer. In fact, in the Torah itself, in the first 5 books, there's maybe there's a handful of prayers, and people are reciting those spontaneously. Jacob utters a prayer at one point in his life. Moses utters a prayer, a couple of them. They seem to be spontaneous. They seem to not have any specific structure, and they are just an outpouring of heart. But the ritual aspect of prayer is based on the sacrifices, the daily sacrifices that were offered in the Mishkan, in the temple, and that was called avodah, which literally means service. It's the service that we give to God. And all these offerings were the way that we connect with God. In the temple, there was an offering in the morning that was entirely burnt up on the altar. There was an afternoon offering. There was an evening offering. There was an additional offering on festival days. All of these, after the destruction of the temple, become the prayer services. There's the morning service, the afternoon service, the evening service, Musaf, which is done, the additional service on festivals. We'll get to that in a second. And after the destruction of the temple, the rabbis struggle. Like, what do we do? Well, as I mentioned in one of our first sessions, the synagogue already existed before the destruction of the temple, and that was a place for meetings, study, and communal prayer. So people were already doing this stuff. Before the temple was destroyed, they were already gathering and speaking words together, mostly the Psalms. The Psalms were the original prayers of ancient Israel. And after the destruction of the temple, they wanted to formalize it. And so what did they, so they said, well, if in the temple we do avodah, without the temple we do avodah shebalev, service of the heart. And service of the heart is tefillah. It's the words that we utter, and the words really of the heart. And it let me share my screen for just a second. Here it is. I'm sharing some resources that Cantor Melissa put together several years ago, still applicable. But prayer, why pray? Right? The commandment to pray is you shall serve God with all of your heart. And how does one serve God with our hearts? Through tefillah, through prayer. Avodah shebalev. It says, "Ovdo b'chol levavchem." How do we serve God? We serve God with our heart. And so that's the basis of prayer in text. And the rabbis go on and on about prayer quite a bit. One of the things that they say about prayer, about tefillah, really, is that there is that prayer should have structure, but it also should we put ourselves into it, and yet even as we do, they talk about prayers that are inauthentic or prayers that are for naught. So even 2,000 years ago, the rabbis are distinguishing between prayer and magic, where they would say that, and they specifically mention these cases, that you can't pray when you are intoxicated or confused. Because you're not in the right headspace, literally, if you're intoxicated. Prayer cannot be a bribe. And when I teach kids, I give the example of, give me an A on the test and I'll come to service on Saturday, right? No, that doesn't work like that. Prayer is not a bribe. Prayer is and they also acknowledge prayer that violates reality. And the rabbis, again, give very specific examples. So, the rabbis say in the Mishnah and Brachot, they say a man cannot say or cannot pray, "My wife is pregnant, God, please make it a boy." It either is or it isn't. You can't change that, right? They knew something about they knew about the science and development of a child and a mother, and they say you can't make a prayer that says that you can't utter a prayer, "My wife is pregnant, I want a boy." Can't do that. Either it's boy or it's a girl. That's just not your prayer is not going to change that. They also give a very interesting example where they say that if you hear a great cry from within the city, you can't pray that it's not your family, because either it is or it isn't. And I liken that to you see you're driving and you see a fire truck zoom right past you, and you can't pray, "Oh, please God, hope it's not, let it not be my house. Please God, make sure it's not my house." Either it is or it isn't. And so reciting a prayer like that, "Please God, let it not be my house that's on fire," that's an inauthentic or vain prayer because it violates reality. It's very interesting what we can pray for and what we can't pray for. And it goes back to the idea that prayer is there to change, or prayer is for us, not necessarily for God. I should mention there are some Jewish traditions and the mystical tradition that say that our prayers, move God. But for the most part, tradition says that prayer is for us. Prayer is to recognize God in the world, recognize what we need, recognize what needs to be done in the world. And as I said before, when we in the Siddur, most of what we do is praise. I would, if I could put a number, I would say 75 to 80% of the words that we say in the Siddur are words of praise. And even when we formalize requests, they are couched in praise, where we say, God, you are the giver of knowledge. Please grant me knowledge. So within the request is the praise that God is the source of that thing which we are requesting. And so it's about raising our awareness of the presence of God in our lives, and elevating our spiritual character, and judging our conduct. It's about waking up. It's about acknowledgement of the world around us. Like I said, awareness. My favorite blessing is, and then we have lots and lots of blessings. We're going to look at a few in a little bit. My favorite blessing is the blessing that is recited after we relieve ourselves in the restroom. And there's actually a funny little midrash about this somewhere. I think it's in the Talmud, where a person, it says that a person is guarded by two angels, and wherever we go. And when a person has to relieve themselves, they go into the privy, and the person says, "Angels, you wait out here. I'm going to go in there," because angels don't have our plumbing. Angels are genderless, and they just don't have our parts or plumbing. And so we say to the angels, "You don't want to see what goes on in there. You wait out here. I'm going to go in there for a little bit." And the cue for the angels to come out, the cue for the angels to start protecting the person after they come out, is the recitation of this blessing. And it's a wonderful blessing that basically says, praised are you, Adonai our God, who in wondrous wisdom has created all of our parts, all of our tubes, and all of the passageways within our body. And if something that is supposed to be closed is open, or something that's supposed to be open is closed, we would be in a heap of trouble, and we couldn't stand before your glory. And it's right. Yes, if our parts don't work, we can't function. And it's basically praising God's wondrous wisdom for creating the human body in such a remarkable way. I love that blessing because it takes the most undignified thing that we do and dignifies it and elevates it in a way that recognizes the complexity of our bodies and recognizes that there are some things beyond our control, and praises God for that. So it's about awareness. Tefillah really is about awareness of ourselves and awareness of God's presence in our lives. And so when we pray for something, we don't in fact pray for something. We praise God as the source of that thing. So for example, where is it here? Oops, I'm going to share my screen in just a second. Here it is. All right, so what I have here is a list of blessings of experience. There are blessings around taste or eating. So there's a blessing before washing your hands. We have blessing for bread, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Foods made from grains but not bread, borei minei mizonot. For wine or grape juice, borei pri hagafen. For fruit, Borei Pri Ha'etz. For vegetables, Borei Pri Ha'adama. Which is who creates fruit of the tree. The wine is fruit of the vine. The vegetables is who creates fruit of the earth. Everything else is a Shahakol Nia Bivaro, by whose word all things came to be. It's kind of like a catch-all blessing for any foods that do not fit under any of these categories. We have blessings of smell for fragrant fruits, right? Who gives pleasant fragrance to fruits. For fragrant trees, who creates fragrant trees. For fragrant grasses, who creates fragrant grasses. For spices and other fragrant scents, right? Borei Mine B'Samim. This is a blessing we say at Havdalah, with the separation of Shabbat and the rest of the week. Blessings of sight. If you see wonders of nature that you don't regularly see, right? Osem Ma'aseh Bereshit, maker of the works of creation. If you experience a hurricane or tornado or hearing thunder, right, whose power and might fill the world. For seeing a rainbow, who remembers the covenant. That's speaking of the covenant of Noah. If you see the Mediterranean Sea, or other great body of water, Hayam HaGadol, who made the great sea. For seeing fruit trees budding for the first time. For seeing a great Torah scholar. For seeing a scholar of secular learning. For seeing a head of state. For seeing especially beautiful scenes in nature. Unusual people or animals. For seeing a place where a miracle happened to the Jewish people, or where a miracle happened to you or someone in your family. Again, all these blessings of experience, blessings of hearing, blessing of hearing good news, Hatova Hamitiv. You say we praise God, the one who is good and makes good. And the blessing for bad news. We say Dayan Ha'emet, the true judge. This is a blessing that is said by mourners immediately before the funeral begins, and there's a tearing of the ribbon. We'll talk about that when we talk about life cycle events. But we have a blessing for good news, and we have a blessing for bad news. Funny story once that so in Israel, rain is very scarce, and rain only comes at one time of year. And the blessing for rain is the blessing for good news. Hatova Hametiv, the one who is good and the one who makes good happen. There was, I remember one time where it was pouring. I was in Boston. I was in rabbinical school. I remember it was pouring, and I was inside, and I needed to get to my car, and I was pouring, and I was like really not happy because I didn't want to get wet. But I had to get to my car, so I ran to my car in the rain, got wet, and I was like, "This is the blessing for rain, is like who is good and makes good." And then I realized, oh, there was a big splotch of bird poop on my car that has now been washed away. So I found a way to affirm that blessing is good, right? That rain is good. It washes the dirt away. So like that was my way of finding something good there. But this is hearing good news. And this is also interesting. We'll talk about this when we talk about the prayer service. But in one prayer, we insert prayers for rain, but we for the land of Israel, but we only insert prayers for rain in the rainy season. So we shouldn't pray for rain when we know it's not going to rain. Again, that's the very practical aspect of tefillah, that prayer is not magic. Don't pray for rain in the summer, because rain's not going to fall in the summer in Israel. Pray for rain in the fall and the winter, because that's when it's going to rain. You want it to have good rains and right to fructify the land, but don't pray for rain when rain's not going to happen, because that violates reality. And here's the blessing for relieving oneself. Right, blessed are you, Adonai God, sovereign of the universe, who formed humanity with wisdom and created us with many openings and closings. It is revealed and known before the throne of your glory that were one of them to be ruptured or one of them to be blocked, it would be impossible to survive and stand before you. Blessed are you, who heals all flesh and does wondrous deeds. So all of these blessings that we have over sight, over hearing, over smell, over taste, and then in the morning we have these morning blessings that are, this is the list specifically from Maimonides, but we have this list called Birkot HaShachar, the blessings for the morning blessings that we recite at the beginning of every prayer service. And Maimonides actually wrote these and said, wrote them in the context of getting ready in the morning. That when you recite these blessings, you're affirming things, but you're also doing this as part of your morning routine. And when you hear the voice of the rooster or birds, or maybe your alarm clock, right? When you put on your clothes, when you put on your hat, when you rub your eyes, sit up, and all this stuff. So blessings and prayer, tefillah, is all about raising our awareness. It's not about asking for things. As I said, 75% of the things we do in the Siddur are praising God, are about and raising our awareness of the world around us and our experience of the world around us. So let me get into a little bit more of the theoretical, right? So here's some, all right, inspiration from our sages. What do some of our sages say about prayer? Right, prayers that you pray are the very presence of God. That's what Pinchas of Korat says. He's a Hasidic master. Mordechai Kaplan, the service of gratitude is eternal. Our worship must not be impatient supplication, but patient praise. We must think less of what we lack, more of what we have. Right? It's not about asking, but it's about awareness of what we have. Rabbi Edward Feld, he's a still living contemporary rabbi. We enter the synagogue in conversation with ourselves. As we engage in prayer, this conversation becomes one conducted with God. This is Maimonides from his first statement about tefillah. Maimonides asserts that there is an obligation to pray and enumerates its obligation in his list of 613 mitzvot. Other medieval authorities disagree and find no warrant for the obligation in Torah. So why does Maimonides turn prayer into an obligation? For Maimonides, prayer instills a sense of appreciation and humility before the wonders of life, essential aspects of a religious path. Thus, he sees prayer as an essential part of the process of religious formation. One's prayer is answered only if one takes one's heart into one's hands. This is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. This is great. I'm not always in the mood to pray. I do not always have the vision and strength to say a word in the presence of God. But when I am weak, it is the law that gives me strength. When my vision is dim, it is duty that gives me insight. That prayer should be a regular routine, even if you don't feel like you want to do it. Because it elevates ourselves, it raises our awareness, and it helps us. So I want to look at so actually, before I do that, is any questions on anything we've covered with respect to prayer? No? Okay. So I mentioned this in the first class. I think it was the first class, so the second class, the first when we talked about the history of the Jewish experience, that the first Siddur appears in, I think, the 9th century of the Common Era. All throughout the Talmud, the rabbis have an entire section dedicated to prayer. It's called brachot, which means blessings. But it's not systematic. It's they bring up different subjects at different times and different blessings and prayers, and they're all there in some form, but there's no system to the service. And sometime in the 9th century, 9th century or 10th century, around there, somebody writes a letter to Saadia Gaon, who was the head of the academies in Babylonia. He's called a Gaon, which means genius, or big shot. All right, he's the guy who's he's just the most learned person of this generation. And somebody writes and says, we're gathering a prayer service together. We're gathering a service of tefillah. Can you tell us how to do it? Can you tell us the order? And so Saadia writes a letter back and explaining it. And that's the first Siddur that we have is the Siddur that Saadia compiles because somebody asks him how to do tefillah. that structure is essentially what we do and have today. So we're gonna walk through that just a bit. I'll share this structure of a service. So this is the structure of a service. There are 3 types of prayer found within the structure of every service. As I mentioned, praise, thanksgiving, and request. This is how every single service you're going to find anytime you walk into a synagogue is structured. Some pieces may be there, some pieces may not be there. They kind of pull out and insert depending on what time of day and what time of year and what holiday. But this is the structure of the service. So getting started, we have blessings and songs and psalms. This is called Birkot HaShachar and Pesukei Zimra, which means morning blessings and verses of song. We always start with this. This is our warm up. This is just a warm up. It's if you ever exercised, you can't just pick up the heavy barbell, or you can't just like run a mile. You need to stretch your body. You need to move you need to use lower weights just to warm things up. That's what this is. This is warming up your heart by reciting these blessings. And these are all statements of praise, statements and statements of affirmation. And then we have what's called a Chatzi Kaddish, which Kaddish, it's a short Kaddish, but Kaddish is a divider in the service. Then we have a call to worship, and then we have the next section, which is the Shema and its blessings. And there are the Shema is flanked. It's got 3 blessings in its section. The first blessing is praises God as creator, then praises God as the giver of Torah, and we say that God, we affirm that God loves Israel because God gave the gift of Torah. And we recite Shema, which are 3 paragraphs from the Bible, from the Torah, Deuteronomy 6, sections of Deuteronomy 11, and then Numbers 15. And then we have a praise of talking about God as Redeemer, how God redeemed Israel from Egypt and will redeem again. And then we move to our Amidah, which is the standing prayer, and that's how we talk to God. And there are prayers there are recitations of praise. There are some requests, and then there's some gratitude. And then we have the full Kaddish, which is another divider. And then we have a Torah service, which is not in this structure. We'll get to that in a second. There's the Torah service on Shabbat, on festivals, and on Mondays and Thursdays. And then we have the closing part of the service, which Aleinu, Mourner's Kaddish, and some sort of concluding song. But every single service is going to look like this. So let's take a deeper look, right? Birkot HaShachar. We talked about that, how we prepare, how we talk to God. The Shema, we talk about God, the Shema and its blessings. Right, the Shema is the affirmation. We Jews don't really have creeds or faith. We don't have long recitations of creeds or faith. We have the Shema, and that's kind of just 6 words. And what's interesting, and we'll get to this in just a moment, going back to our list of blessings, the blessings that praise God are phrased in a formula. Baruch atah Adonai. We speak to God. Blessed are you, Adonai. The Shema is not that. The Shema is a recitation from the Torah, and we address us. Shema Yisrael, listen up, Israel. Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. That Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. So Shema stands out because it's a biblical text, but also because it is not a direct statement to God; it is a statement to ourselves about God. And then we have the Amidah on Shabbat, has 7 blessings. The themes are essentially, we talk about how God had a relationship with our ancestors, how God has great powers, how God is holy. And then we have a blessing about Shabbat, and we conclude with a blessing of accepting our prayers, giving thanks, and peace. Weekday Amidah has 19 blessings, because on weekdays we can ask God for things. Because God rests on Shabbat, so we can't ask God for anything on Shabbat. The only thing we ask God for on Shabbat is a good Shabbat, is to have a good Shabbat. But on weekdays, we can ask God for all sorts of things. So we start with the same first three and the concluding last three, right? We praise God for having a relationship with our ancestors, having great powers and holiness. And then we have we ask for knowledge, repentance, forgiveness, redemption, healing, life, community, compassion, humility, righteousness, Jerusalem, redemption, different kind again, listening to our prayers, Zion, acceptance, thanksgiving, and peace. And then the Torah services here, where we read from our sacred texts, and then conclusion. And then in the evening, evening service only has Shema. There's no warm up to it. There's Shema. We go right into Shema. The Amidah, which is silent, and then some conclusion. On Friday evenings, we have Kabbalat Shabbat, which is the welcoming and preparation for Shabbat, because we can't just go right into it. We need to prepare with easing our way in. And I mentioned in our, I think, second session that the mystics of Tzfat in the 16th century compiled and introduced Kabbalat Shabbat. Here is all the specifics of this is kind of what we do on a regular kind of service. The Birkot HaShachar, the morning blessings. These are all pages in Siddur Lev Shalem. And then the Chatzi Kaddish, the Shema and its blessings. And then the Amidah, the standing prayer, right? Again, all these blessings that I went over before. The Torah service, which we remove the Torah scrolls, we read from Torah, read from Haftarah, and we return the Torah. Musaf, I mentioned Musaf earlier. Musaf is the additional service recited on Shabbat and festivals. We do not, our tradition specifically at Beth-El is not to do a full Musaf, but we do a song or something to recognize that there is Musaf. The reason for us not doing this, and Reform communities do this, some conservative communities do not have Musaf, some do not. Because it's a remnant of the additional in temple practice. And the question is, are we going back to temple practice? Do we pray for the restoration of the temple? That's a question. And some people say no, so we don't, so we don't do that. However, our exception is on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which has a more complete Musaf, mostly because all of the cool stuff that happens on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur happens in Musaf. And so we do a fuller section there. And then the conclusion of the service. But really every, as I said, every service will have this structure. So for example, the afternoon service, Mincha. Mincha doesn't have section 1 or section 2. Mincha, you start with the Amidah, and if there's Torah, you read Torah, but then you go Mincha, so Amidah to the conclusion. So Mincha is really short. Ma'ariv, the evening service, you don't do the section 1, you just do section 2 and section 3. You don't do section 4, you don't do section 5, and you do section 6. On Shabbat, you do it all. On festivals, you do it all. But really they insert, but it's the same exact order. It just depends on which pieces of it you're doing based on, again, which time of day and which day of the week and festival, and whether it's a festival or not. So we have this, and again, every service is going to look exactly the same. It just depends on what is inserted or taken out. Any questions on that? Okay, great. So let's talk about something else about prayer. Very important terms I want to introduce: keva and kavana. So just above here, we read this prayer by Heschel, this statement by Heschel. I am not always in the mood to pray. I do not always have the vision and strength to say a word in the presence of God. But when I am weak, it is the law that gives me strength. When my vision is dim, it is duty that gives me insight. That's a great It's a very telling statement, very insightful. And you think, oh my gosh, a guy as amazing as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, I'm not always in the mood to pray. What? Yeah, sometimes you're not in the mood to pray, right? But you do it anyway. Why? Well, a number of reasons. Keva and kavana. Keva means literally the fixed words of prayer. Right, the when, how, and what prayers are arranged and recited. It's the order. It's and it's the exact words that are recited. Kavanah is the intention. It's the concentration. It's that aspect of ourselves that we bring to the prayers every time we are every time we open the siddur. And really, for many people coming to this brand new, especially those converting to Judaism and learning the prayers, just how to say them, you're working on kavanah. Sorry, keva. I apologize. You're working on keva. Don't worry about kavanah yet. You have to learn what you're saying in order to have kavanah. Or there's another option, because there's always more than one answer. Sometimes you can come into a service where you know nothing about what is going on, but you are so moved because you just feel the presence of God. You feel the spirit of the room. That's kavanah. So maybe you've got kavanah, but no keva. You might feel completely lost, but then might connect because of what you feel happening in the room. They work together. And yet we open the same book every single time we come in to a worship space. It's the siddur. The siddur is the exact same thing. It means order, siddur, order. It's the same order. It's the same words every single time we come in. So how are we to make that experience new every time? Right. A very famous statement from the Talmud is that if your tefillah doesn't have kavanah, you haven't done real tefillah. Right. So how do I, if it's not fresh every time, how do you do that? So it's difficult. There's a couple of interesting things here, right? Jewish prayer is guided by two opposite principles: order and outburst, regularity and spontaneity, uniformity and individuality, law and freedom, a duty and a prerogative, empathy and self-expression, insight and sensitivity, creed and faith, the word and that which is beyond words. These principles are two poles about which Jewish prayer revolves. Again, Heschel, routine holds us in readiness for the moments in which the soul enters into accord with the spirit. Heschel's always good. I'll read that again. Routine holds us in readiness for the moments in which the soul enters into accord with the spirit. And then Leah Goldberg, teach me, God, to bless and to pray for the secret within the enfolded leaf, the glow of ripening fruit, and this freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to celebrate, to fail. Teach my lips how to bless and sing praises as your time is renewed with the arrival of morning. And evening, that my day today be not like my yesterdays, that my day not simply be habit. Right. So there's this tension that we have to navigate. That we, on the one hand, we have to become comfortable with the words in front of us, but we also have to bring ourselves and open ourselves to those prayers, to those recitations, to those tefillot. And they are very different skills. There's the routine of continually reciting words, and then there's the entrance into the words of the spirit, of the soul. And that's a difficult task for people who are still struggling with the words. For example, I was thinking about this recently. When I was in rabbinical school, I spent an entire month, every single day of the month, learning Ashrei. It's one of the morning blessings, one of the morning prayers. It's Psalm 145 with some additional pieces in front and lines in the beginning and the end of it. But I spent an entire month focusing on learning that recitation, that psalm. just so I could master the words. And as I was doing that, lines would jump out at me like, oh, that's what that means, or that's how I connect to that today. That's speaking to me today. So you have to work on keva, knowing how to say everything, and bringing yourself to something. The words of the Siddur don't change, but we change. We are different every single time we open that book. And one particular prayer might speak to us one time and not the next, and vice versa. Maybe you had an experience one day that you were thinking about God as being creator of all, and the prayer, whether it's morning or evening, the Yotzer in the morning, Ma'ariv Aravim, maybe that prayer jumped out at you because it connected to that moment, or maybe you really you are in need of healing, or a family member is in need of healing, and the healing prayer really speaks to you one particular time that you're there. So the Siddur is there to be the fixed words, and we are different every single time we come to a synagogue and open the book. The blessings, as I said earlier, are moments to raise our awareness. They're opportunities to find our connection with God. And when we recite those praises and those blessings, we connect to them in different ways. They speak to us in different moments, and that's why that repetition is important. Especially, people many of you coming to this brand new, attention to the practice is I think your primary goal. And if something gets through, if your soul connects, all the more better. And then there's another, this idea of custom of the place. Every community has their own way of doing things. Every synagogue has their own tune. I've been in other synagogues, and you go to different synagogues. Oh, I don't like that tune, but I like that tune. But that's a different tune than it's everybody's different tune. That's okay. And some people have insert these words, and that some people insert third words. So everybody has a different tune here. We chant. Right? We don't read, we chant, we sing. That we have a lot of words, but we chant them all. Music is perhaps the most abstract and expressive language. It helps us when words are insufficient and has the power to renew the meaning of words that are recited over and over again. So Torah is chanted, prayer is chanted. And not only is prayer chanted, but prayer is chanted, tefillah is chanted differently at different times. So there is and it's called nusach. So there is nusach for weekday. So if you go to services on a weekday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the service is going to be chanted one way. If you go to service on Shabbat, it's going to be chanted a different way. If you go to service on holidays, completely different, like festivals. Has special melodies within the festivals. So, hearing da 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 da. What is that? That's Rosh Hashanah. That's the holidays. We don't do that on Shabbat because it's not Shabbat. Weekdays, is our weekday Amidah. We don't do that on Shabbat because that's how we chant the Amidah on weekdays. On Shabbat, it's da 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 da. Wait, no, hold on, I'm confusing. Right, so that's the Shabbat Amidah. That's and so all of that is those melodies connect with the particular services that are happening depending on which day of the week, which holiday it is, and all that stuff. I'm not gonna want to skip that. women and prayer. I want to look at this specifically because prayer, according to the rabbis, well, I'll say it this way: the model for prayer, the way we do tefillah, is actually a woman, is Hannah. So the rabbis cite Hannah in the book of Samuel as the prototype for how we do. It's pretty incredible. This section right here, that that's the word vatit palel al Adonai, right? And Hannah prayed to God, weeping all the while. As she kept praying before God, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. And she says, and it's funny, the verse is not here, but Eli, the priest, comes to her and says, "What are you, drunk, woman?" And she's like, "No, I'm not drunk. I'm pouring out my heart before God." And Hannah prayed, "There is no one, there is no holy like Adonai. Truly, there is none beside you. There is no rock like our God." So the model prayer, the one, right, is Hannah, and the rabbis point to her, and what is she doing? She's praying in her heart, and she's praying silently, right? Her lips move, but her voice could not be heard. And then she prays aloud, and that's how we. That's one of the ways that we do the communities do Amidah, that they recite it silently to themselves, and then there's a communal recitation. Either way, it's just, I think, really telling that she is the model for prayer, for in the rabbinic mind. That the way it was done, that personal, spontaneous prayer followed by a structured liturgy that she recites, and we have we have the blessings here at the beginning of our Amidah. We include the matriarchs along with the patriarchs together, because they are our ancestors. In some Orthodox congregations and some conservative congregations, they only have the patriarchs. And the reason for this actually is that this is a verse. This is a biblical verse. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov is actually a verse that that God recites to Moses at the burning bush, it's the rabbis excise it, put it right in our prayers, but we add this section, the line afterwards, with the four matriarchs as well. So again, just covered keva and kavanah, right? The fixed words of prayer, the intention that we bring to it, the right, the nusach, the music that tells us what holiday it is or what day of the week it is. Any questions about prayer from this point? So I want to go back a second to this document here, blessings of experience. So every blessing is phrased in basically the same way. We have a 6-word formula, which is Baruch Atah Adonai, and then followed by Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. So let's look at this for a second, because it begins every single blessing we say. Blessed are you. So we have we praise God. We actually bless God, or we describe God as blessed, that God is blessed. You are speaking directly to God and using a stand-in for God's name. Right? We don't say God's name. Many Sidurim actually print out the name of God. I didn't here because I'm not comfortable with that. Unless it becomes a holy book, if that's the case, because I printed this out before. But so it's a very intimate kind of relationship. We're speaking directly to God. Blessed are you, Adonai. Very intimate. And then we go really big. Eloheinu, our God, right? So it's intimate, one-to-one, and then collective Jewish people, Eloheinu, our God, and then Melech HaOlam, sovereign of the world or the universe. So we just go really big. So the God we are speaking to, the God who we are intimately addressing one-to-one, is also the God who is the God of the Jewish people, and the God who's the creator of everything, king of the sovereign of the universe. So that kind of encapsulates everything. That it's intimate, it's personal, it's collective, and it's universal. That's how we begin to praise God. And then what we do is we ascribe to God whatever thing that is. So if we're talking about bread, it's hamotzi lechem min haaretz, the one who brings forth bread from the earth. Right, borei pri hagaf, another popular one. The one who creates the fruit of the vine. Let's go to another one. Let's go to one of these down here. Right, that any of these, right? Meshana Hebriot, that who makes all creatures different, who really literally who diversifies all creatures. But these blessing, this is the same blessing formula you're going to find in all over the Siddur. That these 6 words followed by the thing that we are ascribing to God. And that's how I mean that we raise our awareness, because every time we say this blessing, we raise our awareness that God is the source of this thing. Now, what's interesting and I think really powerful is that, and something I've noticed with my Christian colleagues, they bless the thing. We bless God. Let me say that again. When we're more about to when we're at I have breakfast with fellow clergy once every couple of months, and we're sitting there and we recite the blessing before the meal. They say, "Bless this food, bless this fellowship." Okay, but that's not how we bless God. We praise God as the source of the thing. We don't need to confer blessing upon anything, because everything is blessed because it was created by God. So we bless God to raise our awareness that God is the source of the thing. I think it's really, really incredible that, like I said, that's the purpose of prayer. It raises our awareness. It says, God, you are the source of this thing. You are the source of this thing that I'm about to eat. Or you are the source of this great news that I heard. Or you are the one who gives me the ability to walk on 2 feet. Or God, you are the one who gives who is the source of peace. Or God, you are the one who is the source of knowledge, which is what I seek right now. So we raise our awareness by saying that blessed are you, Adonai, implying, God, you are the source of this thing that we are about to talk about, or do, or see, or eat, or smell, or whatever. Raising our awareness of that thing. And then we have other categories of blessing, which the first one here leads to, which is the next 4 words are Asher Kidshana B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu. And these 4 words are added specifically to Jewish ritual blessings. Right? The rest of these blessings are just universal. God is the source of, right? You're the one who brings forth bread from the earth. You're the one who creates various kinds of nourishment. You're the creator of the fruit of the vine. But these 4 words are extra. Asher Kidshana B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu. You are the one who makes us holy with mitzvot, and you charge us with whatever it is, the specific Jewish ritual. So here it is, you are who makes us holy with mitzvot and charges us with washing of the hands. Or you are the one who makes us holy with mitzvot and charges us regarding shaking the lulav. Or you are I'll stick on the same holiday, who makes us holy with mitzvot and charges us regarding sitting in a sukkah. And on Passover at the Seder, we say that who makes us holy with mitzvot and charges us with eating bitter herbs, right? The maror, the seder, who makes us holy with mitzvot and charges us with eating matzah, because those are specifically Jewish rituals that we do, and we say the Asher Kitshanu Mitzvotav V'Tzivanu addition to signify that this is a specific Jewish ritual that God has charged us to do, making us holy through the doing of the mitzvot. So that's like a subcategory of these blessings, these blessings of experience. Okay. Any questions? Any questions about blessing, prayer, any of that stuff? Okay, so here's something I get from a lot of people, especially people who are not familiar with the keva aspect of things, the fixed words of prayer. People will say, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what the words mean. Or maybe, sorry, the other way around. They do know the keva, right? They're so familiar with things because they've been reciting it for years. They're like, I don't know what the words mean. I don't know what I'm saying. And I say, okay, that's fine. But the way that I frame it is that I think many people today are so hung up on not knowing what the words exactly mean that they miss the opportunity to connect on a deeper level. And I say to somebody, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm like, okay, I don't really care. Just be in the moment, right? Be in the moment. Just sing the words, connect. Prayer is not a cognitive experience. Prayer is an emotional, spiritual experience. So if you don't know exactly what the words are, that's okay. Take a siddur, open it up, read the English, study it, figure out what it means later. But right now, when you're in synagogue, be in the moment and connect on a deeper level. Because that's the purpose of prayer. And I say to people, like I said, I guarantee you, like, what you're saying is probably good and uplifting and meaningful. Take my word for it. And then go back later on, open it up, sit with it, read it, understand it cognitively. But really, in the moment, tefillah is not an intellectual experience. It is not a cognitive experience. It's not to get your brain thinking. When I give a sermon and I'm teaching something, that's to get your brain thinking. But tefillah, prayer, that is an emotional experience, a spiritual experience meant to move your heart. And that's, and I think anyone can appreciate that. I have been to services at other houses of worship where I have no idea what's going on, and I probably would not, if I did know the exact words of, like, like a mass in Latin, I probably wouldn't connect to that at all. But you can feel it. Like if it's a moving religious experience, it's a moving religious experience, and you have to be in the moment and allow that to happen. So, one question is, especially for those who are learning this new, how do I connect to this? I don't know what I'm saying. It's okay. Just be in the moment. It's okay if you don't know what the words mean. Look it up later. Study it. It's okay. And to a different question, another question I get a lot is, how do I know if my prayers are answered? Right? How do I know if my prayers are answered? And as I said before, and I've been speaking about before, I think that's the wrong question. Because it's not necessarily about whether or not we get what we are asking for, but whether we are changed by, whether we feel God's presence, whether we are moved and transformed by the words that we say and by the experiences that we have. does does God answer our prayers? I don't know. I don't know. It reminds me. I think it was it was the movie with Jim Carrey, Bruce Almighty, right? Where anybody see Bruce Almighty, where he becomes God. Morgan Freeman's character is God and grants him all the powers, and he gets all these emails. And he just starts typing yes, 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 and responds to all the emails yes, and like it's just a whole big mess because everybody gets their prayers answered, and it's just right. But that's not what it's about, right? It's about being transformed by our prayers. There's a couple of questions here. I ask about weekday siddur because it's not easy to learn if I'm only practicing once a week or once a month in services. What's the best? Right? Yes, it's not right. It's very difficult if you're only doing it once a week or once a month. Absolutely. The best way to learn is to do. Right. The best way to practice is to practice. Right. What is your right? Which is why I call it Jewish practice. I call everything practice, and everybody practices. You know who practices? For every day until he retired, Michael Jordan practiced. Why? Because he wanted to get better. At what? He was the best. No, he wanted to get better. Right? We all want to get better at whatever we are doing. So in order to do that, we practice. Which is and it's also why I call it Jewish practice, because our practice is always changing, and our practice always informs us of who we are, what we're doing, what we're engaged with, and we're always changing. Our practice changes, which is why, for those of you converting, I said, build a Shabbat practice, and a kashrut practice. Why do we practice? We practice so we can practice, right? We learn, right? When we practice, we learn a skill. And then when we've learned that skill, we've learned another skill because we keep practicing. So yes, the best way to practice is to practice and to keep doing. That's actually what it means, right? The word practice comes from Latin praxis, and praxis means do. It means doing. So the best way to do is to do. And the best way to learn is to really struggle with it, and it's hard, right? Which is why I said, I spent every day for a month learning Ashrei, and I've never, I know Ashrei top to bottom now because I spent a month, 15 years ago, focusing on Ashrei, and I moved on to another prayer. Is there a weekday siddur? So your that's right. It's a practical question, right? Is there a weekday siddur that I recommend? The conservative movement has it's Sim Shalom. It's kind of it's a bit older. It's about 20 years old or so. It's a thin gray book. Sorry, not gray. It's a thin, like, maroon book. That is a weekday siddur. Our minyan uses it on Sunday mornings when they meet. There, a really good siddur is the Koren siddur, the Koren Sachs siddur. The caveat is that it's an Orthodox siddur. It's beautiful Hebrew, beautiful English translation, wonderful commentaries, but it's Orthodox, so it doesn't have all of the same liturgy that we do. Our liturgy differs a bit, adding in the matriarchs, different morning blessings, slightly different morning blessings. But the Koren, Koren, is a really, Koren weekday siddur is really wonderful. Again, beautiful English. But you're going to find, King of the Universe and Lord, and the morning blessings are going to say, who has not made me a woman, who has not made, or who has not made me a slave, who has not made me a Gentile, instead of our blessings, which are who has made me free, who has made me a Jew, who has made me in the image of God. it's going to have some other things that don't really fit the theology and practice of an egalitarian setting. But as far as like a comprehensive siddur, Koran's really good. Just again with the caveat that it's an Orthodox siddur. And again the Sim Shalom, it's not, they don't print them anymore, I don't think, but it's the Sim Shalom for weekdays. Is a good weekday siddur. How can you personalize your prayers while still adhering to tradition? Great question. So I think it's a bit of both what I was talking about, Kevan Kavana, that using the words of tradition and adding your intentions, and sometimes words will speak to you, and phrases and prayers will speak to you at different times. Also, to add your own personal prayers, like there are moments for that, certainly. One of the at the end of every Amidah, there's the opportunity, and you'll see this in the Siddur. It's like, you may add your personal prayers now. At the end of the Amidah, and there's a space for that, because, and this is the reason I think so, is that it's hard to just like pray. It's hard to just like, what are the words I want to use? What am I thinking about? It's hard. It's hard to just summon those words. Maybe it's easy for some people. For me, it's really hard. And when I'm reciting the prayers and in the routine of recitation, like the juices are flowing, and when I'm finished with the traditional words of prayer, I'm like, okay, now I'm in a prayerful mood and I can say what I want to say personally. So I think it's a combination of back on for a second, the prayer and the traditional words of prayer serve as like a warm-up to understanding what we want to say personally and individually. So it's a combination of as I said, the mastering the traditional words and adding our own intentions, right? Keva and kavana, and also cultivating that own space, one's own prayer life, and using, I think, the words of tradition to, as I said, get the juices flowing and warm ourselves up into how we want to to give us the ability to express ourselves. Good question. There's something else. Where is it? Here we go. Yeah. A little bit of vocabulary. We have went over, but I just want to finish up a couple things. Vocabulary. Daven, to recite Jewish liturgy, when somebody, I'm davening, right? They're reciting the prayers. We're not sure where the word comes from. I've heard it comes from the word divining, right? Nobody knows. Shelech tzibor, really, it's a prayer leader. It's literally means one sent by the community. It's the prayer leader. Minyan, a quorum of 10, needed to recite specific sections. Shmona Esrei, the 18. Shacharit, morning service. Minchas, the afternoon service. Musaf, the additional service. Ma'ariv, the evening service. Kabbalat Shabbat, the service that precedes and the literally receiving the Sabbath that precedes the Shabbat. Erev, the eve of, the evening before the holiday. We'll talk about Erev in just a moment. Chag or Chagim, holidays. Moedim, used by Sephardim, just the same word. Chol Moed, regular day, days of the festival. Nusach, the musical mode. All that's right. Shul, right? It's from the Yiddish school or synagogue. All right, there's that. Very important words here that will say a lot. Prayer choreography. We move during prayer. We don't sit still. We move during prayer. There's a tradition in the Talmud that said that Rabbi Akiva would begin his prayers in one corner of the room, and he'd wind up in the other corner of the room, because he'd be just moving throughout. We are not meant to sit in a pew in one place and not move. That is very Protestant. That the idea of sitting being prim and proper exactly where you are, that is a very a post-Enlightenment Protestant tradition. I like to move. I don't like to sit still. I have the advantage of standing up, all like the bima, but I like moving around. And I encourage you. These are all resources on the website. I encourage you to look at these. Right, there's shuckling, there's the back and forth swaying motion that you've probably seen observant Jews do. There's standing, there's gestures that we do, right? Kissing, stepping, beating one's heart, shaking, right? Covering eyes. There's bowing, there's kinds of bows at the waist, bending the knees, full prostration. There's different kinds of bowing at different times of the service. At where we gather the fringes at Ahava Rabbah. Right, there's the at Lecha Dodi on the final verse, we stand and face the doors as we greet the presence of Shabbat. The Amidah, we stand and face Jerusalem. We bow at different parts of the Amidah. We rise on our toes like the angels. Modim, we bow to show respect because we're saying thanks. Right, different standing and bowing at different times. You can look at all these notes and on the website about all the choreography. But we're not supposed to be static. We're supposed to be moving and doing different things at different times, and with our bodies, because it's prayer is not just words of our lips, but it's also full body expression that happens as part of the service. So, any final questions? Feel free to type them into the chat. Okay. Great. So I apologize for running a little bit long. Next week, notice how we said the word Erev. Erev means the night before. Well, next week is Erev Thanksgiving. And nobody works on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. It's Erev Thanksgiving. And so we will not be meeting next week, but we are back on the 29th. In 2 weeks' time, when we talk about the seasons and festivals on the Jewish calendar. So I hope to see you soon. Remember, keep doing Jewish. And if you're in the conversion class, hope to see you at services and other events that we're having. And I will wish you a happy Thanksgiving and see you soon. Bye, everybody. Good night.